Athletic Director Phil Fulmer should be on the same hot seat with head football coach of the Tennessee Volunteers, Jeremy Pruitt. Hello, everybody. I'm Marky Billson, and I don't see how you can separate these two. There's all this talk that Jeremy Pruitt is in his final days as the head football coach of Tennessee because the Vols are about ready to go on probation. And Rocky Top being what it is, and at times incredibly stupid, they say, new head coach about to go on probation, bring in Hugh Freeze. That I would hope wouldn't happen, but if it did, then I think you'd be talking about the death penalty for the Tennessee Volunteers instead of resurrection in a few years. But nevertheless, in 3 years, Phil Fulmer has been Jeremy Pruitt's biggest defender on Rocky Top. Why not? Consider Pruitt's personality. This is a man who is destined to be a coordinator. His job as the Tennessee Volunteers head coach is the leading example in East Tennessee of the Peter Principle, and frankly, he was hired to take orders from an athletic director who maneuvered his way in and never thought he should have been fired as the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. So he would be co-coaching. We've seen Fulmer coaching the offensive line. I mean, when Will Friend was out this past year, in fact, Fulmer came down and coached the offensive line. They've often talked about, well, yes, we will use Phil Fulmer's vast coaching experience to help us here. It wasn't working in 2008. It's not working now. But the big thing here is if Pruitt is dirty, Fulmer is dirty. There's just no other way around it. And I'd like to point out, the Lori Loughlin scandal, I don't know any other way to describe it, and all this over at Southern California, that took down their legendary athletic director, Lynn Swann. All right, so if that probation regarding water polo took down a legend like Lynn Swann, a football scandal should absolutely take down Phil Fulmer. And if it doesn't, the NCAA is going to be looking at Tennessee every day. If he wants to try to bring in Hugh Freeze, I don't think he will bring in Hugh Freeze because I don't think Hugh Freeze is going to want to take orders. And if you don't fire Phil Fulmer, then any coach who comes in, I think you're only going to find coordinators, FCS coaches, that sort of thing, who would want to work with a Phil Fulmer who's going to be so hands-on and over his shoulder. And, that's one of the reasons why Les Miles didn't come to Tennessee when there was a coaching search. But the other thing is, Phil Fulmer is really bad at hiring head coaches. He's atrocious. First coach he hired was as a head coach. I mean, he's had assistants and all this, but that's the whole thing. He's been a head coach, so he's been looking for people who would show him deference. And it's still the case when he's looking for a leader. Well, that doesn't add up. So, let's go over here. Let's look at who he hired to be East Tennessee State's head football coach. You may remember he was hired to be an advisor to the revival of the ETSU head football coaching program. ETSU asked Phil Fulmer, would you like to coach the team? And he said no. And refusing to coach the Buccaneers, but then becoming the AD at Tennessee is a huge, huge slap in the face to ETSU. Vols fans don't care about that. ETSU is subservient to Tennessee, so there's not a big deal made about it, but it is a slap in the face to ETSU. Now, that being said, what they eventually did was hire Carl Torbush, who hadn't coached in 15 years, not at the top level. He was, at the time, the linebackers coach at Liberty. He wasn't even a coordinator. And Liberty wasn't even an FBS program back then. It'd been 15 years since Torbush had had a rather mediocre 3-year coaching career at North Carolina. But don't you see, his head coaching career peaked in 1998. So did Phil Fulmer's. Now, his second hire is Jeremy Pruitt, a man hired, as I said before, to take orders. Record there, 16-19. Carl Torbush's record at ETSU, 11-22. Man cannot hire a head coach. Pruitt's a disaster. He's inarticulate. Look, I could go down the record from, grabbing Jared Guarantano's face mask, doesn't have the temperament, doesn't have the intelligence for the job, this sort of thing, but he's an embarrassment. And he's such an embarrassment, it's a very real possibility Pruitt had to cheat to go 3-7 this year. Now, the hope is that a probation, it's absolutely absurd. And think about this. The Vols are so low on the totem pole that people are saying, you know what, it'd be a good thing to go on probation. That's how terrible Jeremy Pruitt is, because then you can fire him for cause and you don't have to pay his buyout. Okay. But the thing is, this position is not what the Tennessee fans think it is. It doesn't pay as much as other positions, even though Tennessee is one of the most profitable football programs in the country. But look at who John Curry pursued, and was made to be a scapegoat that the Vols position just isn't what it used to be. Greg Schiano, Jeff Brom, Mike Gundy, Dave Doreen. They're all making more money now than Jeremy Pruitt is, despite working at less profitable programs. And also the expectations are somewhat delusional. Vols fans still think that they should have a nationally ranked program. Under the circumstances, you've got to look at a situation also that the last 5 Tennessee head football coaches that have been fired, Butch Jones, Derek Dooley, Phil Fulmer, as well as Johnny Majors and Bill Battle. All of them, except for Dooley, were only a year removed from a winning season. And Battle was fired after a winning season. So was, by the way, John Majors. Otherwise, you're given a year. One losing season after a 10-victory year, and Fulmer's out of there. One losing season after back-to-back 9-victory seasons, Butch Jones is out of there. Not a lot of job security in Knoxville. Not a lot of pay, expectations high. Who are you going to get? Who are you going to get? Really? They're talking about Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher has never coached in the NFL. But if you're talking about a program that's going to be on probation, that's possibly going to have to pay buyouts, I know you're saying that, well, if they go on probation, they don't have to pay, the head coach and all this. Well, there's going to be so many court cases on that. We'll see. There'll be settlements. There'll be legal fees. Trust me, there'll be buyouts, even if it isn't written that way. But Jeff Fisher, this out-of-work head coach who's never coached in college before, never recruited and all this, he might actually be the best person to try to revive the Tennessee Volunteers at 63 years of age, mind you, because nobody else will have his resume who will want the job. It's literally to that point these days. And let's face it, if Pruitt is dirty, Fulmer is dirty. How can you keep one without the other? It'll be a total rebuild, and then maybe somebody who has spent their life in football, not around college coaching, but has been to a Super Bowl, has been a somewhat successful coach. He's got a lot of mediocre seasons, but he's got a few winners. That could maybe put the program back to 8-4 status if all goes well. If all goes well. But that's what you're going to get. If Pruitt is dirty, Fulmer is dirty. It's as simple as that. I'm Marky Billson. I ask that you like this on Facebook, hit the bell, that sort of thing. And until next time, see ya.